I never imagined that the walls of my small one-bedroom apartment would start to feel like both a refuge and a prison. The rent was 2 months overdue, and every day the anxiety in my chest grew heavier. I wasn't lazy. I worked 2 part-time jobs, both unpredictable and underpaid. But in this city, independence had a price I was struggling to afford. My name is Sana. I moved here after my divorce, trying to piece together a life I could call my own. First, things felt hopeful. A new beginning, freedom. But freedom without stability is just another form of fear. I counted every rupee, planned meals like military operations, and avoided unnecessary conversations with neighbors. Survival had become my full-time job. That's when Faisal, my landlord, started showing up more often. At first, he came under the pretense of checking the water meter or fixing the leaky faucet. But his eyes always lingered a little longer than necessary, and his questions got more personal. Do you have family nearby? Anyone helping you out? I'd respond politely, but my unease grew each time. Then one evening he came to collect the rent again. I know things are hard, he said, leaning against the doorway with his usual smug calm. Maybe we can work something out. I tried to keep my voice steady. I'll have something by next week. He chuckled lightly, stepping just a little closer. You don't have to pay. If you're willing to offer something else. For a moment I didn't understand. Then it hit me like a cold slap. I'm not that kind of woman, I said flatly, my fists clenched at my sides. He shrugged. Suit yourself. But I can't keep waiting forever, Sana. He turned and walked away, whistling like nothing had happened. I shut the door behind him and locked every bolt. That night, I sat on the floor with the eviction notice in my lap. My pride warred with panic. I had no family in the city. My ex-husband had moved on. My savings were almost gone. And yet, even with my back against the wall, I couldn't shake the feeling that giving in would cost me more than any rent ever could. I stared at the cracked ceiling, thinking of all the women who had disappeared behind polite smiles and closed doors. I didn't want to become one of them. But what choice did I really have? The room was silent, yet my thoughts screamed louder than ever. And in that silence, a single question lingered. How far would I go to keep my roof and my dignity intact? The next few days passed in a blur. I avoided Faisal's calls, ignored his knocks, and tried to focus on work. But each shift felt longer and each meal smaller. The silence in my apartment grew louder. I had no idea how I'd make it through the week. Then, on Friday evening, just as I was returning from work, he was waiting. Leaning casually against the building's staircase railing, Faisal smiled as though we were old friends. You're hard to catch these days. I walked past him without a word, but he followed me up to my door. I'm not here to fight, he said. I have a counteroffer. I turned to face him, jaw tight. You already made one. I'm not interested. He raised both hands like he was offering peace. Listen. One evening. Just one. No expectations. No pressure. You join me for dinner. Let's talk like civil people. If you still want to walk away after that, I won't bother you again. The desperation inside me was clawing at my ribs. Rent was still unpaid. The threat of eviction hung in the air like a storm cloud. One evening didn't sound like surrender. It sounded like a lifeline. After a long pause, I said coldly, I'll join you, but only if you agree to one condition. His smile flickered. Go on. You forgive the rent. Entirely. No debt, no games, no strings later. That's the price. Faisal tilted his head, intrigued. He hadn't expected me to set terms. Interesting. Fine. Consider the debt erased. The next night, I sat across from him at a quiet rooftop restaurant. The city lights shimmered below, but I felt like I was floating above reality. Faisal was charming. He spoke with confidence, listened attentively, even joked about his failed marriage. I found myself responding almost against my will. He told me stories about his childhood, how he built his property business from scratch. He complimented my resilience, praised my strength. His words were smooth, rehearsed, but oddly comforting. For a moment I thought, could this strange agreement really turn into something real? In the weeks that followed, he kept his word. No more pressure. Instead, he started showing up with groceries, fixing the loose kitchen cabinet, even walking me home after late shifts. Slowly, I began to let my guard down. My friends, what few I had left, warned me. "He's playing you," one said. "People like him don't change overnight." But I didn't want to hear it. I wanted to believe that maybe, just maybe, something genuine could come from this chaos. After all, didn't everyone deserve a second chance? Still, a small voice inside me whispered, "Deals made in desperation rarely come without cost." And deep down, I wasn't sure if I was buying into love, or just being sold a prettier version of control. First, everything felt strangely perfect. Faisal had stopped asking questions, and for a while, it seemed like he genuinely cared. He brought me a second-hand microwave when mine stopped working and remembered how I took my tea light with 2 sugars. The small gestures felt meaningful. They felt safe. But safety was an illusion. Started subtly. One night, he asked why I hadn't picked up his call during work. I explained gently that my shift had been hectic. He nodded, but something flickered behind his eyes. Possessiveness disguised as concern. Then came the unannounced visits. I'd come home to find him sitting outside my apartment, claiming he just wanted to make sure I got home okay. At first, I smiled politely, convincing myself it was harmless. But inside, a quiet discomfort began to grow. One afternoon, as I was folding laundry, I received a message from an old friend, Aliyah, asking if I was okay. "He called me," she wrote. "Said you were busy lately." He sounded off. That same night, I overheard a conversation Faisal had on the phone. I hadn't meant to listen, but the hallway echoed. "She agreed. Told you she would. All it took was wiping the rent. You owe me dinner for this one," he laughed. My blood ran cold. I stepped back into my apartment, heart pounding. I tried to convince myself I'd misheard, misunderstood. But I knew that voice. I knew that laugh. And I knew what it meant. The pieces came together painfully fast. The generosity, timing, charm. It hadn't been affection. It had been calculation. I hadn't entered a relationship. I'd been recruited into a game I never agreed to play. When I confronted him the next day, he shrugged. "You're blowing things out of proportion. It was just a joke with a friend. Why are you being so dramatic?" I stood there trembling, not from fear but from rage. "You used me," I said, my voice breaking. "You made me think this was something real." He stepped closer, voice cold now. "You agreed, remember? No one forced you. And let's not pretend I didn't help you." That was the moment something inside me cracked. Not from his betrayal, but from my own. I had betrayed myself. I had let desperation blur my boundaries, hoping to rewrite a story that was never mine to begin with. The walls of my apartment felt smaller than ever. Every corner whispered a version of myself I didn't recognize anymore. And yet, there was no one left to blame, not really. As I stared into the mirror that night, all I saw was a woman who wanted love, but settled for survival. The illusion was gone. What remained was a question I could no longer ignore. What was I willing to sacrifice just to feel seen? And was it already too late to reclaim myself? The morning after that confrontation, I woke up to the same cracked ceiling, but I wasn't the same woman lying beneath it. Something inside me had shifted. The silence in the room no longer felt heavy. It felt hollow, like something had finally escaped. Pack slowly. No rush. No panic. Just quiet determination. I had found a local women's support center through a former colleague who'd once whispered, "If you ever need a way out, call them." I never thought I'd need that number. But now it was my lifeline. When Faisal knocked again that afternoon, I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Let him stand on the other side of that door, wondering. Let him feel the weight of absence. I left with one suitcase and my dignity partially stitched back together. The support center offered a room, a counselor, and, Most importantly, a place where no one asked for anything in return. I began working part-time at a bookstore nearby, cataloging novels I'd never read but always dreamed of. Weeks passed. Faisal tried calling, messaging. Once he even came by the shelter. But I had changed my number, blocked him everywhere and left no trace. Some people don't deserve closure. Just silence. And in that silence, I began to rebuild. I started journaling late at night. Small entries about pain, power, and the twisted way love sometimes disguises itself as rescue. Eventually, I turned those entries into anonymous blog posts. To my surprise, people read them. Women messaged. This happened to me too. Thank you for writing what I couldn't say. I wasn't alone. And neither were they. One rainy evening, sitting by a foggy window with a warm cup of chai, I finally forgave myself. Not for trusting Faisal, but for punishing myself for needing help in the first place. I had made a choice in a moment of desperation, but I was no longer defined by that moment. I was moving forward. And maybe that's what healing really is. Not forgetting the scar but learning to live without letting it own you. I moved into a new neighborhood months later. Smaller apartment but brighter windows. Fewer memories. More light. As I arranged books on a shelf, I found an old photo of myself. Before the divorce, before the compromise, before the pain. I didn't look stronger back then. Just younger. Live. Now I looked like someone who had survived something. And chosen to grow beyond it. I closed the photo album and whispered to myself, never again. Because sometimes love isn't what saves you. Sometimes it's the thing you walk away from so you can finally begin to love yourself.